For facades with sandwich panels, we have our CarrierRail system. Here we have a cooperation with Fischer Profile and their Swiss division Montana. Uh, our system, in combination with Fischer Profile panels, are certified in Germany, and due to spread forming screws, there is no risk of damage to the thermal insulation. Let's have a closer look at our system and its components. In this overview, we can see our carrier rail as a base rail going vertically, and on top of the carrier rail, we have our insertion rail connected via our cross connector, which we will see in the next close-ups. So on top of the picture, we can see our carrier rail, which is our base rail for this system. It always is vertically mounted. On top of the carrier rail, you then mount the cross connector with our MK2 and our M8 hexagon bolts. And beneath the cross connector, you screw in the anti-slip plate just as an additional security measurement. The next slide, we can see our insertion rail 2.0 with its end stops and fixed stops. The fixed stops are always mounted in the middle of the rail for thermal expansion, and the end stop is always mounted at the end of the rails for a clean end of the system and fixation for the modules so they can slide out. For the top and the bottom rail, we also have insertion rail covers, which just give the rails a nicer look and a better finish if you see the system from beneath or from top. The spring plug is set above the insertion rail into the cross connector as an additional security measurement, so the insertion rail can't get out of the cross connector, and it also can help you if you assemble the modules. So with pushing up the module, the insertion rail can get out. Here on this side, we can see our rail connector, which connects two insertion rails. Beneath that, you can see the Terra griffs, which are used for equal potential bonding between rails and modules. And down here, you can see the module safety. It always sits at the top between two modules. So we can ensure ventilation and less migration of the modules. Following that, you will see a short assembly demo video. Firstly, the carrier rails get mounted vertically to our sandwich panels. Then the cross connector and the anti-slip plate are mounted. After that, you can insert the insertion rail and start then putting in PV modules. But let's have a closer look at the assembly of this system. So in the first step here, we will measure the starting point of the rails and start to assemble the rails according to our project plan. First, we start with fixation of two screws in the middle of the rail in the fixating points, and the other holes we will have the gliding points. In the next step, we put our cross connectors onto the carrier rail. Usually you start with the first MK2, then you apply the cross connector, fix it with the first M8 bolt, and afterwards putting in the second MK2 and the second M8 bolt. We start with the very first cross connector and the very last cross connector so that we can level out the insertion rail on the perfect level. Then you can slide in your insertion rail. You only have to watch for your cantilever. This has to be at least 50 millimeters, and the maximum will be always a fourth of the span width between your carrier rails. Then after placing the other cross connectors on the rail and behind the insertion rail, we will put in at least 2 of the spring plugs at the top of the insertion rail into the cross connector, just like seen on the picture. Afterwards, we put on the anti-slip plate right beneath the cross connector, just as an additional securement. Then we can put in our fixed stops. The fixed stops usually goes in the middle of the rail on the left and the right side of the cross connector on each layer. It has the function that with thermal expansion, the rail can't slide out to the left or to the right. For setting the next layer of insertion rails and cross connectors, you will have to measure the distance. It will be given out by the project report and your static report according to the size of your module. Then in the end, you simply slide in the module to the upper side, just like you slided the insertion rail into the cross connector, you slide the module into the insertion rails. You pull it up to the downside of the upper rail, then you tilt it in and let it sink into the bottom rail. After placing the first module, you would put in the module safety and then add the second module. At the end of a rail, for fixing the module and having a clean end of the system, we will use the end stop, just slides in right at the end of the insertion rail. As an optional and visual feature, we also have our covers, which you can put in at the very top of the system or the very bottom. That was our carrier rail system. Also watch our other videos of introduction to our WallPV systems.